cosmic, eldritch, Lovecraft. These are the words that we chose to complete a media that we continuously indulge ourselves upon, which is horror. You guessed it, I'm talking about horror again. Why should the horror genre be completely glued to the idea of these larger-than-life being completely ruling over us with their tentacle tendrils, cosmic, the titular word that are in its very essence tied to the universe and the cosmos, dreadfully distinct from the earth. Eldritch, a word that describes the otherworldly, the uncanny, the unnatural, a name that might as well have been conjured up from a well-endowed fantasy series back in the 90s. And of course, Lovecraftian, which from its very namesake, the idea of the unnatural and the uncanny, defined by one man, Lovecraft himself. A racist supremacist, sure, but one who is a very accomplished writer. These three words describes the nature of the media that I'm talking about today, right now. But horror? I don't think horror is the right complementary word to finish with. Horror is a genre of speculative fiction which intends to frighten, scare, and disgust. While I do think you can't necessarily watch or read these kinds of media without having those emotions running through you, I do think that the better word that would fit the bill is terror. Stephen King, as always, had put it best. Terror is when the audience is faced with something that strikes up genuine fear. Specifically, he wrote about the three different types of terror and its examples. The gross out, the sight of a severed head tumbling down a flight of stairs. It's when the lights go out and something green and slimy splatters against your arm. The horror, the unnatural. Spiders the size of bears, the dead waking up and walking around. It's when the lights go out and something with claws grabs you by the arm. And the last and worst one, terror. When you come home and notice everything you own had been taken away and replaced by an exact substitute. It's when the lights go out and you feel something behind you. You hear it. You feel its breath against your ear, but when you turn around, there's nothing there. This is where the induction of fear is solely caused by imagination. A chilling illustration of terror by King. The induction of fear caused by the imagination. As much as I am in love with these three submedias, either it be cosmic, eldritch, or Lovecraftian, all of them are carefully crafted stories created by these amazing writers and creators. One who is sometimes more problematic than others, sure. Every single one of them has attempted and succeeded in making me second guess myself. The characters tormenting their imminent demise, though not because of some violent excursion or something, or the certain death that is certainly coming for them, but only suffering through the newfound knowledge they now gain, that they are infinitesimal against these beings, dissociated and displaced from reality itself. Before their psyche realize it, they only have one other place to turn. Madness. What a fun topic to get into, huh? So, let's explore these types of media, shall we? Let's trudge through the different layers of existentialism that these media have to offer. And of course, the ones that I love. As much as I loathe the guy, we do at least have to talk about the grandfather of the genre itself, H.P. Lovecraft. From the mind of a racist, somehow the idea of segregation wasn't entirely lost to the mind of H.P. Lovecraft himself. But I guess at the expense of his behavior, he did create one of the most iconic universes, which at the time was considered contemporary enough to be created and defined as its own genre. He rarely gives out details about his characters because at the end of it, I know they are just basically complimentary appetizers before the main course. which was these otherworldly beings he had created. In terms of characters, he loves using the archetypal smart person as a protagonist. Some of them are scientists, professors, psychologists, scholars, which would make sense since viewing the stories by these standards of these knowledgeable people. Lovecraft had a basis of describing the horrors he has written, because the narrator of the stories appear and act as knowledgeable people, ones who succeed in the educational field, and sometimes even particularly pursue the unknown. With the backdrop of this reality he had created, ruled by fish gods and tentacle deities, these knowledgeable men had one thing to strive for. This is a big part in Lovecraftian horror stories, because most of the scientists and scholars who started out this perilous journey was already doomed from the start, biting unfathomably more than they can chew, or hell, even stomach. These pursuits of knowledge will lead to a level of existentialism that substitutes to the withering of the brain entirely. As they face these unknown gods and the unquenchable search for the answers, they will go mad. Madness is the topic Lovecraft loves to repeat over and over and over again. One of his famous stories had madness written on its style anyways, losing control of the intensively trained mind, or a severe state of mental illness, some people would call it. But these poor men had not the luxury of having their minds decaying by themselves or by a degenerative disease or an ailment. They were basically driven off a cliff at extreme speeds down into a chasm which rolled no bottom, while grand tentacled gods and fish-headed beings torment them all the way down while they still freefall. Things in which mankind could only fathom as primordial beings took no physical form and entered their dreams, somehow manifesting itself into an apparent deity, something that was sometimes hard to even contemplate, leaving their characters with the incomprehensible, knowledgeable burden they carry, mimicking the Titan Atlas shouldering the whole weight of the sky. But we are not higher beings, gods and titans. We would only be crushed under the weight or be driven off to the same cliff where madness would both follow you all the way down and waiting for you at the bottom. In some ways though, a lot of Junji Ito's work is about how ugly humans can be and the relentless entities haunting these stories. Hellstar Rimina and Uzumaki are great examples. It was all about the unyielding power of an unstoppable force plowing through everyone and consuming and changing everything in its way. Like the snail part in Uzumaki. No. But I notice, considering our topic for today's video, that I gravitate towards the story. The Enigma of Amigar Fault. On a fault which was uncovered when an earthquake struck land, unearthing holes which were precariously shaped like silhouettes. Naturally, people flocked towards the discovery. As eerie as the holes may be, it held another different feeling entirely when one of the spectators felt drawn towards one of the holes. Before long, he now felt convinced that the hole belonged to him. The hole made it out as if they were a perfect match after all, both by the height and size. Through sheer hysteria, he forced himself into the hole and descended into the mountain. One by one, people got more and more convinced that each hole was for one of them. A calling that drives them desperate, or should I say more specifically, mad. The realization sets inside them as they realize that probably eons ago, the holes were shaped by somebody, or something, and that something had somehow known that the hole's owner would find their way into this exact point in time, down to the earthquake and the owner's willingness to climb a mountain and eventually die in the fall. But every single person that descended into the hole knew that which hole was which, and which hole was theirs. They knew in an instant that it was their grave, years before they were supposed to die anyways. An unexplainable, unattainable civilization had created these souls and placed them in the vault, and somehow each of these souls has their person's personality. Like a long-lost shadow, and naturally, they would gladly take what is theirs, but instead of taking it, you were instead consumed, conjoined into the whole, conjoined into the silhouette, becoming one, inviting you in, and sending you into an elongated hell of suffering. Sure, at the end, the story does circle back and goes back to what makes Junji Ito's stories so iconic in the first place. That the uncontrollable sense of urgency, the unexplainable, is what really gets me. And the story never really left me anyways. King's description of horror and terror definitely fits into these stories. I mean, most of Junji Ito's story does. Almost all of them has these otherworldly beings that are out of our control, consuming and destroying everything in their way. Because if you know Junji Ito, you do know he loves his body horror. I'm not gonna mention this nail anymore. Like one of the 3 types of terrors that Kings have described, the gross out is definitely Junji Ito's favorite. Now let's move on to one of my favorite movies, Annihilation. Here's the really sad thing about me. As much as I make myself out to be a literally active person, sometimes I am more inclined to view medias and just entertainment in general, which are sometimes more visually stimulating. And none have visually struck me like those 3 a.m. thoughts of eldritch beings and existentialism as much as Annihilation did it for me. That's why, specifically for the video, I bought the book by Jeff Vandermeer. People view this movie as Alex Garland's interpretation of Lovecraftian and his love letter basically for it. And Jeff Vandermeer's vision of basically an extraterrestrial biological invasion. While true that it does and succeed in making Lovecraftian horror imagery, I do find a big difference between them. Lovecraft created a universe where otherworldly beings act as God and treat humanity basically as specks of dust, not even peons that they could control. Annihilation's take, instead, on these eldritch beings and gods and titans is just nature itself. And in its very instinctual roots, survival. Mother Nature's favorite game, right? Natural selection. There was no both intrinsic and extrinsic motive when the aliens from the book and the movie fell from the sky and landed in the lighthouse. These aliens had much of a choice, as we did when we were brought on to its existence. Either ageless planetesimals born at the very cosmic birth of our universe, or they may as well just came from an entirely different planet. Orbital forces and gravity holds the power to move them across the universe, speeding with trajectory but never aware of where they will crash. Their first instinct was never meant to annihilate us, as much as the movie and the book tries to coax us with the title they gave us. They strive to achieve what our ancestors have basically done 1 billion years ago: survive. But what I did think Annihilation did so well was portraying the absolutely helpless feeling cosmic horror does for me. The ever-present feeling of futile doom the moment they pass through the Shimmer or Area X. The inescapable sunken feeling, trapped as both the book and movie explain that simply being inside the Shimmer had already changed them. The macroscopic particle, alien to our main characters, were already inside of them. 2 alien beings in every sense confronted with each other, the inhabitants and the invader, both assimilating into one. Or in a more fitting note, annihilating each other until there is only one. The movie and the book being called Annihilation was never for the sake of the antagonist. It was for the protagonist, humanity itself. Lena, Dr. Fenris, Anya, Josie, Cass, or the more streamlined one, Book, which has the biologist, the anthropologist, surveyor, and the psychologist, were all characters who annihilate themselves in one way or another. It was all portrayed so eloquently. Self-harm, cheating, death of a loved one, addiction, and of course the ultimate form of annihilation, suicide. I'm very careful here, but all of these forms of annihilation are all done with the full regard of consequences that would come upon them. These intentional pains these characters cause themselves leads them to what they did in the Shimmer or the Area X. There is an exact quote for it from the movie when the biologist and the psychologist, or Lena and Dr. Fenris, talk to each other. Fittingly, the supposed psychologist made the connection before anyone else.
Then as a psychologist, I'd say you're confusing suicide with self-destruction. Almost none of us commit suicide, and almost all of us self-destruct. We drink or we smoke. We destabilize the good job, the happy marriage. But these aren't decisions, they're impulses. Probably better equipped to explain this than I am.
What does that mean?
You're a biologist. Isn't self-destruction coded into us? Programmed into each cell?
A difference between suicide and self-destruct. Insinuating that we fully are conscious when we do it. Self-destructing. An act of sabotage, which there are many forms of it, as we have discussed before. But in terms of its actual definition, is there an actual difference between the two of them? To me, suicide feels like a climactic decision, where someone was pushed to it because of their surroundings or the pressure surrounding them. While I guess self-destruction is a knowing descent into the same eventuality. As the psychologist or Dr. Fender said herself, we drink, we smoke, we destabilize a good relationship. It's all done fully conscious of the consequence. These aren't decisions, she said. These are impulses. An act out of our own control as impulse had taken over. She even said that in a microscopic scale, a single cell and billions others would do the same, shedding the old cells so that the new ones can take over. Cellular self-destruction. Is that true for every sentient organism? Is that true for every single microbacterial life? Where the shimmer ever came from? Actually, think about it, they do operate differently from us, right? Instead of dominating their surroundings, instead they assimilate with their surroundings. Be it the bear who devoured Cass and talked like her, or the alien who copied every single one of Lena's move in the lighthouse. The futility of it all is what reminds me of cosmic horror at most. Like the great old ones that Lovecraft had written about, taking all these characters on a journey of existentialism by just the mere presence of these beings. The horror that annihilation, or should I say the terror that these movie and book had bring, simply serves as a reality check for us, simply reminding us how futile our advancement as a civilization has come to naught. Advances in the fields of telecommunication, microbiology, human connection, in a sense, they are unstoppable. And mankind and our advancement as a race are no immovable object. All were lost against these beings' sole purpose: to assimilate, destroy, and consume everything in their path. They overpower us. Their inherent biological mechanic had already decimated us, and it only took our fully developed wits to convince the alien to assimilate our biggest flaw. And that helplessness feeling is exactly what I feel Eldritch Horror comes into play. Annihilation Man, both the book and the movie. You should watch it and read it. So, after talking about all these media that I love so much, why do I gravitate towards Lovecraftian, cosmic, and Eldritch Horror so much? I used to think that I loved to revel in existentialism. It never really stopped me in my tracks and made me question reality and go chase insanity itself, fortunately. But I do enjoy the times whenever I get to question reality. When those 3 a.m. thoughts would occur and I couldn't sleep but just think about these eldritch beings. I view it as some sort of mental exercise that I love to do. And the absolutely best part when thinking like that is when you lose yourself, floating above your body while loud crushing thoughts, which sounded exactly like TV static for me, clouds your mind entirely, rendering myself to be stuck in an outer body experience. I have this very vivid memory back when I was in middle school, when I was apparently sick as shit, sitting right at this wall behind me, sweat beating down my forehead as a wicked headache was going on inside my head as well, as my acid reflux would go up and down my throat like it was doing bungee jumping. And I remember distinctly my vision magnifying itself 10 times over as I feel that I could see every single detail on those white walls of my room. The unsmooth surface became giant ridges and cracks, and the second it felt like I would vomit if I got an even closer look, it would revert back in an instant. It kept on happening when I was sick. Time lost its meaning entirely, as I would swear that it could both happen in the span of 5 minutes or an hour. That was my genuinely first conscious experience of having disassociated from reality, or my own body, entering into the feverish nightmare we all experience when we're sick. And for some reason, it was my Moby Dick. I'm Captain Ahab, trying to regain that experience again. The best way I guess I can describe why I would pursue that high so much was because that I view being lost in something, especially in your own thought, was the best time to spend your time on. When you could live out your life as minimal as you can, there would be less fucking up your own life by your own volition. I guess the pain gone, the stress relieved, the countless hours of imagining up situations that should have happened or you wish could happen would finally stop. I hated living out these fantasies that were not intended for myself in the first place. No one ever wants to be in pain, and I feel it amplified to the tens and thousands of decibels when I have the time to keep it to myself and think upon everything, for both the past and the future. Death was the only escape, but I could never go through with it. So this cosmic horror shenanigan was the best way for me to cope. When I lost my sense of time, when I was back sick, back in middle school, that time when I disassociated, that was the best time for me. Those 5 minutes or an hour that I couldn't tell was valuable. While I would prefer hours would pass by, certainly. I guess it could have been minutes anyways, because I wouldn't be conscious enough to even notice. That's the beauty that I see in disassociating. And I guess the reason why I love cosmic horror so much is that if I ever was stuck in these precarious situations, these movies and books and mangas ever put out, this is what I would feel. You know, most of these stories never had a happy ending anyways. You know? The new silence could either be maddening or it could just be viciously silent. There's no in between. And let me tell you, nobody who suffered through this would stand around and do nothing. Scream, not really knowing if it was out of agony or relief. Or retired. You could just end it all. And go back to what you were. Blissful ignorance. Thank you for bearing through that with me, okay? That was a little bit too much extra, but I'm trying to make it a little bit more interesting. But yeah, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, comment for the engagement, right? That's how you do it. I don't know. I just would like to ask you if you visit my essay that I did for the mainstream media one. That would be great. Just skim through it since the video is basically the same, but yeah, that's about it. I'm still gonna make videos in the future. Hopefully. Thank you for watching.